in the body, and then it becomes a chronic situation later on in life.
One of the problems with many illnesses and diseases is that they plague us in later life, the root causes having been suppressed for years. Doesn't that make it harder for those afflicted with the disease, as well as their physicians, to make the connection between an exposure to toxins, say a decade earlier, and the current poor condition of the person?
Well, these are ongoing processes of detox. If the symptoms are continually suppressed by taking so-called medicines, you might have temporary relief, but it's an ongoing process that then keeps pushing the toxins further into the body. So it's not just one detox that you're suppressing. It's a long-term habit that then becomes these chronic conditions that are much more difficult, but not impossible to overcome as well. We still have to understand what they are. And one of the interesting things that we found was that conditions that are called chronic diseases are not understood by the medical establishment. They even admit that they don't know the causes. So they don't understand these chronic conditions, where it's so much more simple to understand them as just long-term, these factors that affect people's health over a long term that then damage their bodies, and so their bodies aren't able to function as well, and so the organs and the tissues and everything start to become more damaged and the body's not functioning as well. And that's really what chronic conditions are.
We always try to explain to people that health is a natural thing and a very simple thing. And the 4 factors that we mentioned, if you pay attention to those, you will live a long and healthy life without redress to doctors or drugs. And so it's not expensive either. It's natural for humans to be healthy. It's unnatural for humans to be ill. But it's been turned on its head. People think that ill health is just a process of life. It's inevitable. And when you get ill, you go to the doctors and he gives you some drugs. Well, that's completely the wrong thing to do, and unnecessary. So that's really what our book's about.
The idiom, prevention is better than cure, is still a powerful axiom for leading a long and healthy life. That should be the primary goal for human beings, so that they don't have to resort to modern medicine when feeling unwell and the pressure to treat symptoms mounts. Unfortunately, that isn't always possible for a multitude of reasons. Most of us are so used to outsourcing our health to the medical profession for a solution to our illnesses because we lack the knowledge of how to help our body heal. Let's say a person ends up in a situation where they find themselves ill. What alternatives are there for a person to look into other than modern medicine?
We tend to find that we know far more about health than doctors do. As probably even Dr. Vernon Coleman, as I was talking to you earlier, has admitted that your doctor is probably the most likely person to kill you, and that's something from a retired GP to say. But he's quite right, because doctors don't understand health. So
they're not taught about health, they're only taught about disease.
Yeah.
So that's why they don't understand it.
And to treat your symptoms with drugs, which all have what they call side effects, but they're direct effects, they're direct effects of the drug. And they're very often giving you one drug to counteract the side effects of another. And we've come across people who've got probably a dozen different drugs they're taking. It's, and it's killing them and they don't realise it. So the thing to do, if someone has got themselves into a chronic situation where they've been taking lots of drugs or whatever for a long period of time, or just had a very unhealthy lifestyle of living on hamburgers and cream cakes and beer, which might be very nice that they thought for a number of years, but you can't keep doing that. And your body will eventually not be able to function properly. It'd be like having a nice car, like a Ferrari, and just putting sawdust in the engine or something. It might be a nice car, but it's not going to run very well if that's how you treat it. And the body's the same. It's a fantastic organism, but if you put rubbish into it, eventually it will not work properly. And it's as simple as that. And that's, 12 years now, what we found, these simple rules. And as I said earlier, I don't mind admitting, that I'm 72, 73 this year, and I've lived by these rules and they've served me well. I don't take drugs from doctors or even go to see one. And it's not expensive, it's just very simple, and that's how life should be. It should be very simple. And so if someone's in this chronic situation, is to pay attention to these, and so that the body can start to reverse the symptoms. And the first thing to start with is look for where toxins may be entering your life, and particularly your body, and eliminate them, whether it's EMFs, stress, environmental toxins, what you wash yourself with, all of these things, what your food is, and then to upgrade your food and pay greater attention to eating healthy food, organic, fresh fruit and vegetables. If you're going to cook them, steam them rather than boil them to death, because if you steam them, they keep more of their nutrients, which is what you need. So that you're giving the body the ability to detox itself. And don't be surprised if when you've changed your diet, some people go, oh yeah, well I did that. I went on a vegetarian diet, let's say, and I felt rubbish for weeks, and we say, well, yeah, think about it. You've been feeding your body hamburgers and cream cakes and beer and smoking for years, and now you've gone onto a healthy regime and your body's going, oh, thank goodness for that. Let's start getting rid of some of this toxic material. And, it's a bit like a heroin addict coming off heroin, and they call it cold turkey. They feel absolute rubbish, and just want to get back on the drug again. Well, it's a bit like that when you change your diet for a much healthier one. But that will pass, that time will pass, and your body will thank you for it when it's got rid of all that toxic material, and you then have a new lease of life, literally. And we've come across people where this has happened. They said, oh, I feel so great now, I feel like I can breathe and I can, and it's amazing. All they've done is stop putting rubbish into their body and put good stuff into their body. And that's the first and most simple thing to do.
But the other thing, of course, is that we are exposed to toxins in the environment and unknown, unseen. And so sometimes people are exposed to these toxins, totally unaware that that's happened. They then produce symptoms and think, I don't feel very well, and they think they have a disease, which, and this is part of the understanding that we're trying to help people learn, is that the symptoms don't mean that they have a problem, it's just their body clearing the toxins. So it's a detox. So it's understanding what symptoms are, but also realising that it's a good process instead of, oh, I don't feel very well, oh, it's a bad thing. But again, there are severe symptoms, and obviously each person will have to sort of deal with how they feel about their symptoms. It's sometimes an unknown toxin people are exposed to, therefore they won't know why they feel ill and what's causing it, and that can be really difficult because they're so used to being told you are ill because of XYZ, you've got this disease. They want an answer, and it's not always comfortable to know that there isn't necessarily a clear-cut answer. So this is one of the problems, and one of the ways that people need to understand becoming and staying healthy is an ongoing process. It's not, oh, there's detox, that's happened and it's all over. It's an ongoing process. So even though people are
doing the right things,
improving your health is a process, and the body may just sort of increase the sort of detox. But if suddenly they feel, and this has happened in the last couple of years, people are suddenly having these symptoms and thinking there's something wrong with them, but it's possibly to do with unknown toxins that they're coming into contact with, whether it's a chemical toxin or some kind of EMF. We don't know. They probably won't know, but it's not because of any germ, that's for sure.
One of the difficult things, and it's just worth mentioning this to people because it's quite a shock, it was the first time we came across it, that in England we have down on the South Downs a place called Porton Down, which is probably the oldest chemical warfare plant in the world. It's been there since early World War I, and they've been caught out a number of times over the decades of experimenting on the populace in England, of having modified vans and lorries drive through villages spraying toxic material out to test it on people and see what sort of reaction, unbeknown to the populace of course, and this has caused immense problems. And they've been caught out doing this, and this is just on the occasions they've been caught out. Now they've also been caught out doing it in the London Underground, because it's a nice enclosed space, isn't it, to release some toxic material that people wouldn't know about. And then of course you get large groups of people becoming sick, and of course it can easily be blamed, certainly in these times, it can be blamed on this groups of people going down with COVID. And if they do that in a number of villages, it does several things. One is they get to test one of their new chemical warfare things, and two, it feeds the narrative of groups of people getting COVID. You know, they come mysteriously ill, and sometimes quite ill.
A new outbreak.
A new outbreak of COVID. They've been poisoned by their own government, really, albeit a secret arm of the government, but Port and Down have done this. And we know this has happened in America as well with the military, that they've sprayed various places. So when people get ill, 9 times out of 10, they've been poisoned in some way. It can either be accidental contact with toxic material or deliberate poisoning by, as I say, people like Port and Down. And this can be shocking to people, and so it should be, because you don't expect, well, we do now, but most people don't expect their government to actually be attacking them, but they are. And the whole COVID thing, as we've seen, is a war against the people. You know, the whole thing worldwide is literally a crime against humanity, and there's no other way to put it. So forewarned is forearmed, and that's what we do. That's what we're doing today, is to make people in a small way aware of what's going off, so they can take back control, and they can take back control of their own health and start to question everything that goes off. Don't believe what you hear from the government and the media, because they're not telling you the truth. In fact, they're hiding it from you, and that's why you never hear any of the doctors who are speaking out, like Dr. Andy Kaufman or Tom Cowan. You never see them on mainstream television being able to give their expert opinions on why people get ill, or even us.
Most people remain convinced that they've caught COVID-19 from someone. We've seen parents force their children who've tested positive for COVID using a fraudulent test into their bedrooms for up to 10 days. I even had a friend of mine, double jabbed against COVID, banish his flu-stricken daughter from their home and dispatched at her mum's place. The mother wasn't jabbed, but she fell ill the day after her daughter's arrival and believed she caught the flu from her. There have been many in the freedom movement who've claimed to have fallen ill with something quite different to the flu that made them feel sick for weeks. Many in the freedom movement have claimed that COVID-19 is somehow a bioweapon. This seems implausible, because what kind of bioweapon has a survival rate of 99.99%? That would be another missing weapon of mass destruction. Could there be a possibility that those running the COVID hysteria have added poisons to our environment?
We always say to people, you've got to go back to square one. Yeah. Whatever they've come down with, whether it's individuals or a group, you say, well, look, we can show you, and a growing number of doctors and scientists can show you, there is no scientific evidence that a germ makes you ill, whether it's bacteria or a virus. So, if people get ill, you've got to look for some other cause. It's as simple as that. It's not a germ. We can tell you what it's not. We can't necessarily tell you what it is, because we don't know what you've been exposed to. But the 4 factors that we mentioned, it will be one or more of those 4 factors that is making you ill. And quite often it's a toxin.
We're now being bombarded with media reports around severe cases of acute hepatitis of unknown origin amongst kids around the world. To make matters worse, the reports are trying to suggest that the hepatitis is potentiated by SARS-CoV-2. Looking at the scientific literature around this hepatitis outbreak, it's clear that the authorities are trying to generate a paediatric pandemic by case finding rather than receiving reports from worried doctors concerned about children they've diagnosed. The focus in the literature appears to be pinning the disease to a viral cause rather than environmental poisoning. What do you make of the recent media frenzy around the dramatic rise in hepatitis cases?
The interesting thing of this new so-called hepatitis outbreaks, which apparently are in children, instead of the usual 5 hepatitis so-called viruses, it's now being blamed on some other virus, which is normally one associated with what are called colds or, very minor. So again, there's a reason obviously why they're trying to find a so-called virus associated with hepatitis, but hepatitis is just it's inflammation of the liver, and the liver is the body's main elimination organ, and therefore if the liver is in trouble or it's being damaged or there are problems in the liver, then immediately I would say look for some kind of toxin. And so yes, maybe they put that at the bottom of the paper, or well, it just might be as a sort of minor sort of throwaway, because they really don't want people finding out that it's their exposures to environmental toxins.
Particularly small children, because they're trying to tell us now that there's been an alarming increase in under 5s needing liver transplants. Now, when you look at it, because we know it's not a virus, as they'd have us believe, we know its toxicity, as Dawn has said, because the liver's got to eliminate all these toxins. So you've got to look at what sort of increased exposure these young children have got. Well, as we know, they start vaccinating them from 2 months onwards. So I'm surprised children survive at all with the increasing vaccine regimes. So it's hardly surprising that being vaccinated with toxic material from 2 months old, that by the time they get to 5, they've had so many vaccines and the liver's trying to cope with all this toxicity that it's ruining their liver. I mean, it's fairly easy to see, but of course the medical establishment will not admit that because they're blind to it, because they think vaccines are good. And if any one of them tries to speak out and think, do you think it could be, well, then they lose their job.
It's one of the NHS's biggest held secrets that GPs get paid for diagnosing certain diseases. They also get paid for every patient on their books, regardless of whether or not they're being treated. Many of the doctors I've spoken to are under the very real illusion that it's almost impossible to get seriously ill as a result of medicine due to the advances in their field. They often claim that the only reason conditions such as autism have dramatically increased in recent years is due to advances in screening, better access to healthcare, and a broadened criteria for diagnosis. How would you respond to such claims?
That's an excuse, but if that were actually the case, then there would be a very large percentage of adults with autism, and that definitely is not the case, because if they went undetected as children, then there would be a lot of adults with autism because they were undetected as children, and so that isn't the case, and therefore we can say, well, that explanation doesn't really apply to what we're seeing in reality. So, we have to question that and say, no, sorry, your explanation doesn't hold water. And that's the thing, really, the questioning. It's very, very difficult for people to think they should be questioning the medical authority, which is why possibly they've used a medical crisis to bring in all these new aspects of their agenda, because people are so used to trusting their doctor. The doctor knows it all, and giving their health problems over to the doctor, partly because it stops them from having to think about what their lifestyle is and maybe making some changes, or in many cases making a lot of changes to their diet and lifestyle, which people are reluctant to change. So of course it's very difficult for people to want to change, so they want to carry on trusting the medical system and their doctor, and that's obviously a bit of a problem for them to question it, to go to the doctor and say, well, actually, could you explain, what's in this medicine that you're about to give me? Can I see the package insert for that vaccine you're about to give my child? And some doctors have actually been asked about the vaccine inserts, and when they've been shown the actual package insert of a vaccine, they've been horrified because they haven't realised the contents. They're not taught about vaccines, maybe get an hour in their whole medical school, the years of medical school, so they really don't know what ingredients there are. So they have no idea of what they're doing, except that they've been told that's the protocol to give children because it'll prevent these diseases. So again, it's very difficult, and it's not just hepatitis, HIV. I mean, there are lots of different diseases they're trying to scare people with. I mean, monkeypox as well. Again, sores, blisters, rashes, boils and everything that come on the skin is because the body's detoxing through the skin. These are detox processes. And yes, they look pretty horrible with the pictures that they show, but the fact is that the body, as well as absorbing toxins, it actually releases toxins. That's what these boils are. And when you understand that, people can feel less fearful. And that's really what, as David said, what we're about, to help people have the knowledge so that they're not living in fear anymore, which will obviously help their mental and physical health. And so they can make informed decisions. And that's really empowering. We feel that's empowering for people to then take back control of their own lives.